I walked into our home in Franklin Hills, expecting the usual quiet after a long day at work. Instead, I was greeted by the sound of laughter from the study, a laugh that didn't belong to my wife, Laura. My heart sank as I recognized it. It was Jack, one of her students, supposedly there for tutoring. But why would a student be here at 9 in the evening? My mind raced with suspicion, but I masked my concern with a smile, stepping into the room. "Hey, didn't expect you'd still be here, Jack," I said, trying to sound casual. Jack's smile was too wide, too friendly. Laura looked startled, her eyes darting between us. "Oh, we were just finishing up," she said, her voice a pitch too high. I nodded, but inside, a seed of doubt was planted. The house felt different, charged with an energy I couldn't place. It was as if the walls had eyes, witnessing something I was blind to. I made small talk, asking about their session, but my words felt hollow. Jack gathered his books, his movements too deliberate, like he was performing for an audience. Laura walked him to the door, her laughter lingering in the air like a perfume that didn't belong. Once they were out of sight, I stood there, feeling the weight of the silence. The echo of their laughter seemed to mock me, filling the house with a sense of betrayal I couldn't shake off. That night, I lay awake, the sound of their laughter echoing in my mind. It wasn't the first time I'd felt this gnawing suspicion. Laura had been spending more time with her students lately, always with excuses that seemed plausible but left room for doubt. She'd become distant, her phone always face down, and her stories about her day lacked the detail they once had. I knew I needed to find out the truth, but how? The quiet of the night seemed to mock me, each tick of the clock a reminder of my growing mistrust. I tossed and turned, my thoughts racing, trying to piece together the fragments of my life that seemed to be falling apart. The memory of our early days together, where trust was as natural as breathing, now felt like a distant dream. We used to share everything, from our hopes to our fears, but now it seemed like I was living with a stranger who wore my wife's face. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces of the puzzle refused to fit. Was I just paranoid, or was there something I was missing? Laura had always been passionate about teaching, her enthusiasm for literature infectious. It's what drew me to her in college, her ability to make Shakespeare sound like he was talking about us. But lately, her passion seemed directed elsewhere. She'd talk about her students, especially the gifted ones, with a gleam in her eye that used to be reserved for our shared dreams. I remembered the days when she'd come home, her eyes lit up with stories of a student's breakthrough, or how someone had finally grasped the beauty of sonnets. Now, those stories were replaced with vague mentions and quick changes of subject. One evening, I noticed something odd. Laura was wearing a necklace I hadn't seen before. When I asked about it, she brushed it off as a gift from a student grateful for her help with a college application. "It's nothing, Mark, just a token," she said, but her hand lingered on the necklace, protective. The way she touched that necklace, it was like she was guarding a secret. A part of me wanted to believe her, to trust that this was just an overblown gesture from a grateful student. But the part of me that had grown cynical couldn't help but see it as a sign, an emblem of something hidden beneath the surface of our marriage. That night, while she showered, I checked her phone. Nothing explicit, but there were too many messages from Jack, filled with thank yous and emojis. It was then I decided I couldn't just sit and speculate. I needed proof, or I'd drive myself mad with what-ifs. The fear of being wrong warred with the dread of being right. I thought back to our early days, how open and honest we were, and now, the walls between us seemed almost insurmountable. The digital trail on her phone felt like breadcrumbs to a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to find. The idea of installing a camera felt like a betrayal in itself, but paranoia had taken root. I chose a discreet spot in the living room, where it could capture comings and goings without being too invasive. The camera was small, hidden in a bookcase, and I felt a mix of guilt and relief as I set it up. If Laura was innocent, I'd dismantle it and apologize. If not, well, I'd have my answer. I justified it to myself as protecting our marriage, a necessary evil to clear the fog of doubt. But as I set up a device, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was crossing a line, violating the trust we had built. Still, The need to know overwhelmed my ethical reservations. I adjusted the camera, ensuring it had a wide enough view to catch anything suspicious. The act felt clandestine, like I was spying in my own home, turning our sanctuary into a surveillance zone. Days passed, and the footage showed nothing but routine tutoring sessions. Laura's professionalism was impeccable, or so it seemed. But then, one evening, the camera picked up something unusual. Laura and Jack were laughing over a book, too close, too familiar. I felt a sting of betrayal, yet I couldn't jump to conclusions. Not yet. I watched more nights of footage, my stomach in knots, waiting for something definitive. Each session seemed like a performance, designed to fool anyone watching, making me question if I was seeing what I thought or just what I feared. Weeks of monitoring had turned up nothing concrete, just more questions. Every time I thought I had a lead, it slipped away like smoke. But then, one night, the camera caught a moment that made my blood run cold. After Jack left, Laura sat alone in the study, her laptop open. She was typing furiously, then paused, her face illuminated by the screen's glow. She looked around, ensuring she was alone, before she pulled up a video chat window. The air in the room seemed to thicken, my senses heightened as if I was there with her. I could almost hear the silence of her typing, the weight of her secrets. It wasn't Jack on the other end, but the voice was male, familiar, yet I couldn't place it. They spoke in hushed tones about plans, about meeting without me knowing. My heart raced as I strained to hear more, but they were too quiet. This wasn't just about a student anymore. It was something more sinister, more personal. I needed to see who she was talking to, but from this angle, the camera only captured her side of the conversation. The mystery of the voice gnawed at me, a puzzle piece missing from the picture of my life. I replayed the footage, listening intently, feeling like a detective in my own home, piecing together clues that might either save or shatter my world. The tension was palpable, each second of silence on the recording amplifying my dread. The more I watched, the more I felt like an outsider in my own life, peering through a window into a reality that was supposed to include me, but clearly didn't. Laura's secretive demeanor, the careful glances, everything now screamed of a life I wasn't part of. The next day was torture. I went about my routine, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the snippets of conversation. Who was she talking to? Why the secrecy? At dinner, Laura was her usual self, cheerful and engaging, but I watched her with new eyes. The food tasted like ashes in my mouth, each bite a reminder of the facade we were living under. Her smile seemed forced, her laughter rehearsed. Everything about her now felt like a performance for my benefit. After she went to bed, I revisited the footage, this time focusing on her expressions, her words. The tension in her shoulders, the quick glances at the door, as if expecting someone to catch her. Then, I noticed something on her laptop screen, a reflection. It was brief, but it was there. I paused the video, zoomed in. The reflection was distorted, but there was no mistaking the outline of Tom, my best friend since childhood. His voice, which I hadn't recognized through the camera's muffled audio, now made sense. My world tilted. Tom and Laura? How long? Why? The betrayal was a punch to the gut, but it also clarified everything. I wasn't just dealing with an affair. I was dealing with a conspiracy of lies right under my nose. The knowledge burned, a fire of anger and hurt, but also a drive for justice. I couldn't let this slide. I needed more than just suspicion and shadows. The revelation was like a cold splash of reality, waking me up from the dream of my marriage. Tom, the one person I trusted with my life, was part of this deceit. The sting of betrayal was deep, cutting through years of friendship and trust. I knew exactly where to start looking. The next step was clear. I needed undeniable proof, and I was ready to do whatever it took to get it. The game had changed, and now I was playing for keeps. The nights of doubt were over. It was time for action, for uncovering the truth, no matter how painful it might be. The morning after discovering Tom's involvement, I felt like I was living in a different reality. Breakfast was a silent affair, the clinking of cutlery the only sound between us. Laura seemed oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. Or perhaps she was just that good at pretending. I watched her, trying to reconcile the woman I loved with the one who could betray me so deeply. As she left for work, I decided it was time to expand my investigation. I couldn't just rely on the camera in the living room. I needed more angles, more information. That day, I installed additional cameras discreetly around the house, in places where privacy was less expected, like the kitchen and near the back door. Each placement felt like an act of espionage, a necessary betrayal to unearth the truth. By evening, I was back at my makeshift surveillance station, watching the new feeds. Nothing stood out until I caught Laura on her phone, her expression serious, speaking in low tones. I couldn't hear what was said, but her body language screamed secrecy. There was a moment where she glanced at the door, as if checking to ensure she was alone, then continued her conversation with urgency. Later, when Laura returned, she was markedly different, more on edge. She claimed to have had a tough day at school, but her eyes didn't meet mine when she spoke. I watched her. Every move she made now seemed calculated, a performance for someone who might be watching. Was it me she was hiding from? Or was there someone else? That night, I found myself unable to sleep, replaying the footage over and over. It was then I saw something else on the feed, a text message notification on Laura's phone. It was from Tom, just a single word, tonight. My heart sank. What was happening tonight? Were they planning something, or was this just another piece of their deceitful puzzle? The word tonight haunted me all day. I decided I needed to follow Laura to see if my suspicions were correct. That evening, I pretended to fall asleep early, leaving her to think I was out of the picture. I heard her leave quietly from our bedroom, her steps cautious as if she was sneaking out. I gave her a few minutes before I followed, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She drove to a coffee shop, one we used to frequent together. I parked a distance away, watching her enter. My stomach churned as I saw Tom's car pull up shortly after. They met inside, their interaction too familiar for mere friends. They were laughing, touching hands in ways that went beyond friendship. I felt like I was watching my life from the outside, the warmth of the coffee shop a stark contrast to the cold realization seeping into my bones. I waited until they left, my mind racing with what to do next. I couldn't confront them there, not without more evidence. Back home, I checked the new camera feeds, and there it was, a clear shot of Laura checking her phone again, this time with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She typed something quickly, then deleted it, as if she was aware of the possibility of being watched. The betrayal was not just in their actions, but in the lengths they went to hide it. I felt a mix of rage and sorrow, the kind that hollows out your chest, leaving you numb. I needed to gather more evidence, not just for myself, but to ensure that when I confronted them, there would be no room for denial or excuses. The days following were a blur of surveillance and silent suffering. I was acting, playing the role of the unsuspecting husband while gathering my evidence. Each piece of footage was like another nail in the coffin of our marriage. One particular evening, the camera in the kitchen caught Laura preparing a special dinner, something she hadn't done in months. She was humming, a sign of contentment I hadn't seen in her for a while. I knew this wasn't for me. Sure enough, when Tom arrived under the guise of just dropping by, the pieces fell into place. They shared dinner, their laughter filling the space where our love once was. The sight of them together, so casual and intimate, was like watching my life being rewritten by someone else. I decided then that I needed to accelerate my plan. I couldn't let this go on. I started documenting everything, timestamps, names, places. I even managed to sneak a look at Laura's phone when she was in the shower, finding messages that confirmed their affair had been going on for months, right under my nose. The sting of betrayal was personal, but the planning for my next move was strategic. I was no longer just a betrayed. I was plotting my response, my revenge. I needed something big, something that would expose them not just to me, but to everyone who knew us, to the world if necessary. The turning point came when I decided to confront them, but not in the way one might expect. I had gathered enough evidence to know that a simple confrontation wasn't enough. I needed to make an impact. I started by subtly hinting to mutual friends about Laura's late-night work and Tom's frequent visits, planting seeds of doubt that would soon grow into full-blown rumors. One evening, I orchestrated a situation where I could catch them together, but this time in a way that would leave no room for interpretation. I suggested a small gathering at our place, inviting friends who could witness it. I watched Laura and Tom, their performance faltering under the scrutiny of others. It was during this event that I casually mentioned how nice it was to see such close friends spending so much time together. The color drained from both their faces. Friends started whispering, connecting the dots. I had set the stage for the final act. After everyone left, I didn't confront them immediately. Instead, I waited until the house was quiet, the tension palpable. I played the footage I had collected on the living room TV, every laugh, every secret meeting laid bare. One particularly damning clip showed Laura in a compromising position, supposedly stuck in a washing machine with her hair caught in the drum. There was Tom, standing beside her, without a stitch of clothing, both of them laughing, trying to reenact some scene from an adult video they had watched. The absurdity of the situation was matched only by the betrayal it represented. Laura's excuses crumbled under the undeniable truth. Tom tried to speak, but I cut him off, my voice calm but cold. "Save it for the lawyers," I said, the finality of my words echoing in the now hollow space of our home. The aftermath of that night was chaos. Laura moved out to a friend's place, and the divorce papers were in motion. But living together for another week, due to logistical nightmares, was like sharing a house with ghosts of our past. Every corner of the house now held a memory tainted by betrayal. During this week, I learned more from our shared friends, truths that were both vindictive and revealing. One friend confessed that Laura had told him she felt trapped in our marriage, giving me a glimpse in her mindset. Another mentioned seeing Laura and Tom at a local bar, long before I had any suspicions. Each revelation was like adding salt to an already festering wound. But the final twist came from an unexpected source. I received an anonymous email with photos, not just of Laura and Tom, but also of Laura with another man, one of her students I had initially suspected. The photos were from months ago, suggesting that her infidelity was even more extensive than I had known. The sender didn't identify themselves, but the message was clear: I wasn't the only one she had deceived. This new information didn't just fuel my anger. It sparked a need for a different kind of revenge. Not just personal retribution, but something that would publicly dismantle their lives as they had mine. I started planning, not just for the end of our marriage, but for a public exposure that would leave no stone unturned, no lie untold. The betrayal was deep, but my response would be deeper, more calculated, ensuring that their deceit would be their downfall. The week of cohabitation was a slow torture, every moment stretching into an eternity. Every glance, every word exchanged between Laura and me was measured, laden with unspoken accusations and the heavy weight of guilt. I used this time not just to endure, but to strategize, to gather my thoughts in preparation for not just the end of our marriage, but the beginning of their downfall. I started by consulting a lawyer, not just any lawyer, but one renowned for handling high-profile divorce cases, especially those involving public figures or complex personal betrayals. He advised me on how to leverage the evidence I had collected, not only for the divorce, but to potentially damage their reputations in ways that would be long-lasting and public. Meanwhile, I kept my eyes and ears open, tuning into the subtle changes in our environment. Laura's phone calls were a treasure trove of information. Listening in, I learned she was planning to move in with Tom once everything was settled. This knowledge only fueled my resolve. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to make sure they felt the weight of their actions in every aspect of their lives, from their personal relationships to their professional reputations. One evening, while Laura was out, I went through her personal items more thoroughly, with a meticulousness that felt both invasive and necessary. Hidden in a drawer under a pile of old scarves was a diary, not of the love we once shared, but of her secret rendezvous. Reading her words, her descriptions of moments with Tom, and surprisingly with the student from the photos, was like pouring acid on an open wound, but also gave me the ammunition I needed. I scanned pages, taking what I needed before carefully placing the diary back, ensuring no one would know I had disturbed it. I wasn't destroying evidence. I was collecting it, preparing for a reveal that would be both personal and public. My strategy was forming, like pieces on a chessboard moving towards checkmate, ensuring each move was calculated for maximum impact. The day before Laura was set to move out, I decided to play one of my strategic cards. I anonymously sent an email to the school where Laura taught, attaching the photos of her with her student. The subject line was simple: concerns regarding conduct. I knew this wouldn't end her career immediately, but it would start an investigation, tarnish her reputation, and put her under scrutiny from which she could not easily recover. That same night, I confronted Laura, not with rage, but with cold, calculated words that carried the weight of my resolve. I know about everything, Laura. The student, Tom, your little diary. I've taken steps to ensure your actions have consequences. Her face went pale, the reality of her situation dawning on her with a clarity that was almost palpable. She tried to speak, but I held up a hand, silencing her. Save your words for the school board, I said, watching as fear replaced any attempt at justification. I didn't stop there. I also sent an anonymous tip to Tom's workplace about his involvement in this scandal. His job at a local tech company prided itself on ethics and integrity. This revelation would surely put his career in jeopardy, potentially leading to his suspension or worse. The look on Laura's face as she left our home was one of defeat, but for me, it was only the beginning. They had played their games in secrecy. Now, I was playing mine in the open, with each move designed to echo long after the immediate shock had passed. Once Laura was out of the house, I felt a strange mix of emptiness and determination. The house was quiet, but my mind was a storm of activity. I began to organize all the evidence, creating a narrative that would not only ensure my divorce was swift, but would also publicly expose their deceit in a way that would resonate through our social circles and beyond. I reached out to a friend who worked in journalism, someone I knew would jump at a story like this. I handed over the diary entries, the photos, and all the recorded conversations, asking for anonymity, but ensuring the story would be told in all its scandalous detail. The idea was to have the article published in a local paper, one that would be read by many in our community, ensuring the reach was both wide and deep. Meanwhile, I started a blog, anonymous but linked to social media, where I began to post snippets of the story, the evidence, the betrayal. I didn't name names at first, just hinted at the scandal in our perfect town, creating buzz and intrigue. Each post was like a breadcrumb leading back to Laura and Tom, without directly accusing them, letting the public's curiosity and speculation do the work. The response was overwhelming. Comments, shares, and questions flooded in, people connecting the dots from the hints I dropped. It was exactly what I wanted, a public trial by social media, where everyone would judge and remember their actions. The anonymity added a layer of mystery, fueling discussion and speculation, ensuring that even those not directly involved would know the story. The article in a local paper was published a week later, under the headline, "A Tale of Betrayal in Franklin Hills," and it spared no details. The journalists had done their job well, painting a vivid picture of trust broken, lives altered, and secrets unveiled. The school and Tom's workplace were named, ensuring the scandal's reach extended beyond personal circles into professional ones, where reputations were built on integrity. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Laura was put on leave from her teaching position pending investigation, her career hanging by a thread. Tom was suspended from his job, his company launching an internal review that could end his professional life as he knew it. Social media erupted with the story, friends and acquaintances of both sharing their shock, some even coming forward with their own observations or stories they had overlooked or ignored. I watched from the sidelines, my heart a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Satisfaction because justice, in a twisted way, was being served. Sorrow because this was the end of a life I had once cherished, now reduced to headlines and whispers. The narrative I had crafted was taking on a life of its own, spreading through the community like wildfire. But I wasn't done. I knew the public exposure was only one part. The legal battle was another, where I would ensure the divorce was as financially damaging to Laura as possible, considering the prenup we had signed, which included clauses for infidelity. The court date for our divorce was set, and the atmosphere in the courtroom was charged with an almost tangible tension. I arrived with my lawyer, armed with all the evidence, ready to present my case for why Laura should bear the brunt of our financial settlement. During the proceedings, I revealed everything: the diary, the photos, the recordings, even the social media backlash that had painted a stark picture of betrayal to the community. The judge listened, his expression growing more stern with each piece of evidence presented. Laura's lawyer tried to mitigate the damage, arguing for compassion and leniency, but with every point, my lawyer countered with undeniable proof of deceit. The judge's ruling was harsh. Laura was not only to leave the marriage with minimal financial support, but was also ordered to pay a significant portion of my legal fees due to her actions. The prenup held, and her attempts to claim otherwise were dismissed with a finality that echoed in the courtroom. After the court, I felt a heavy relief, like a burden had been lifted, but one that had left marks. The legal battle was over, but the personal one lingered. I hadn't just ended my marriage. I had ensured that Laura and Tom would face consequences far beyond what they had anticipated when they began their affair. Sitting alone in the now empty house, I reflected on the journey from love to betrayal to revenge. It was a hollow victory, but a victory nonetheless. I knew I needed to move on, to rebuild, but the echoes of this chapter would always remind me of the depths to which human connections could fall. And somewhere deep inside, I hoped this would be a lesson for them, a cautionary tale of what happens when trust is shattered, ensuring they would think twice before betraying anyone else.